everybody. It's Glitter Informer, and oh boy, was this an episode. We start out with Tsubasa sleeping in his birdhouse. He's the only one who doesn't get up early, I guess. Then, Ageha comes out of nowhere and is overtaken by how cute he is, so she cuddles him without his permission. He does not like this at all. She then introduces herself and, in true Ageha fashion, says a bunch of stuff at once way too quickly for him to react. Like, wow, this is our first time really getting to talk, isn't it? And isn't it weird that you're not an early bird even though you're a bird? And she gets closer and closer into his personal space. She also calls him boy, which he finds condescending. Overall, Tsubasa does not have a very good first impression of Ageha. Already, I'm finding myself not liking Ageha as much in this episode as I did previously. We already know her to be a motor mouth with a lot of energy, and that makes her difficult to handle at times. She also probably doesn't know that Tsubasa doesn't like being called boy, but it was really rude of her to just spring up on Tsubasa out of nowhere and violate his personal space by cuddling him, despite his audible protests. I guess this is consistent, since she did hug Sora out of nowhere in episode 6, but at least then she'd had a conversation with Sora and Sora was awake. Also, Sora didn't resist and Ageha didn't refuse to let go of her. But it's still a really uncomfortable thing of Ageha to do, and spoiler alert, she never apologizes. So it turns out that Ageha just came into Mashiro's house without Mashiro, Sora, or Tsubasa even knowing, in order to go on a trip to the mountains. She didn't invite them beforehand either. She just came into the house all of a sudden and is like, let's go to the mountains, everybody! Just springing it on them, insisting they come along with her. I don't remember Ageha being this forceful. Mashiro and Sora agree to come along with her, and Tsubasa goes too, even though he's very upset about it. Why doesn't he just stay home then? I guess because they decided to bring Elle with them and he wanted to be there to protect her should anything happen, but that's never explained in the show itself. Anyways, Ageha drives them to the mountains, and she sings to the tune of the opening theme, albeit with the wrong lyrics. Also, she named her car Pyocha. Also, she keeps on calling Tsubasa boy, even though Tsubasa explicitly tells her to stop. When they arrive at their destination, Mount Raso, they immediately come across a sign saying that the place's mascot, Soragoro, has riddles posted for those who climb the mountain, and if you solve them, you win goods not available for purchase. Elle is immediately enamored with Soragoro, who is an orange bird who looks suspiciously like a puni bird, except for his really big tail feathers, his mustache and beard, and his lipstick. So, the others decide to solve all the riddles for Elle. The riddle solving brochure they get points out two paths to the top of the mountain. The first is an easy, leisurely path, while the other is a difficult, steep path that goes right up the mountain. Sora is super excited to go on the difficult path, and she drags Mashiro along with her. This leaves Ageha and Tsubasa to walk the easy path, much to Tsubasa's dismay. Why doesn't he just go on the path with Sora and Mashiro? I guess because he's carrying a really heavy pack. To Ageha's credit, as they're walking along, she offers to carry Tsubasa's pack for him, but Tsubasa huffily refuses because he's Elle's knight and he could do it all by himself. Also, we get this pretty silly-looking face from Ageha. I get that the animation of the faces gets a little loose sometimes and the characters are farther from the camera, but she's not that far. They then come across the first riddle, which says, Konosaki, atatata sutareta chitata takuta nanoda. If you take out all of those tas, it translates to English as, beyond here, there's an athletic course. It's pretty obvious that you're supposed to ignore the tas, especially since they're colored in red while the rest of the text isn't. This riddle was so obvious to me on first watch that I thought there had to be something deeper. Surely the answer to the riddle couldn't be that easy to figure out, right? Nope. The actual answer to the riddle is to go to the athletic course, and it takes the gang a really long time to figure it out. Tsubasa never does, and the only reason Ageha does is because she sees Tanuki on the side and she realizes that since Tanuki starts with ta, maybe removing the tas will reveal the answer, as if that wasn't obvious already. So they go to the athletic course and Tsubasa struggles, but he manages to complete the whole thing. Meanwhile, Ageha takes a side path and bypasses the course entirely. Turns out all of Tsubasa's effort was pointless because the next clue wasn't even in the course. They just needed to go in the direction of the course and continue onwards. They then come across the second riddle, which asks, what's beautiful yet hidden? This is much more vague than the first riddle, and one that I'd understand if the two were completely stuck on. And it seems like Ageha certainly is, because she gets distracted by the ropeway that carries people to the top of the mountain and says they should ride on that. Tsubasa gets upset at Ageha for going off course and ignoring the riddle, and Ageha tells him to just forget about it and come with her. Naturally, he's furious and decides to go another way to search for the answer to the riddle on his own. It turns out the path Tsubasa chose to go on merges with the one that Sora and Mashiro are walking. He vents to them about everything that's happened since they split up and says he's no good at dealing with pushy people like Ageha. Mashiro and Sora tell him that Ageha might be a little pushy, but deep down she really does care about Elle as much as Tsubasa does, and Ageha probably thought that he'd understand that she wasn't neglecting Elle's wishes when she went to ride the ropeway. There are two problems with this. First of all, if Ageha was going on the ropeway to search for the answer to the riddle, which she is, spoiler alert, then she could have just told Tsubasa. It would have taken, 5 seconds at most? Why did she expect him to read her mind when he was telling her how concerned he was about them going off course? Second of all, Mashiro's like, oh, Ageha's a bit pushy, but she's really nice, trust me. So Tsubasa just has to put up with that? He has to deal with Ageha invading his personal space and calling him a nickname he hates? She's still calling him boy, by the way, even though she knows he hates it. Tsubasa's being expected to stop being so mean to poor little Ageha, but maybe Ageha should be a little bit nicer to Tsubasa. As is, only one of these people is being expected to change their behavior for the other's sake. It's really unfair, especially when you consider that in real life, a lot of the people watching this show have somebody pushy in their lives who keeps doing things to them they don't like, even when they tell them to stop. What this show is saying is to just suck it up and deal with it because that's just how that person is, and that's just a really toxic message to send. Moving on, Tsubasa realizes that he should follow Ageha up to the top of the mountain because there's probably something relevant to the riddle up there. He's too far away to catch the ropeway in time to meet Ageha, so he runs up the mountain at full speed, even while carrying that gigantic backpack. This guy's an absolute mad lad. Unfortunately, Tsubasa doesn't have the same level of training that Sora does, so he's reduced to climbing on all fours on the stairs at the very top. Fortunately, Ageha's there waiting for him, and she pulls him up. She stayed there waiting because while she was riding the ropeway, she saw him running up the mountain. Now that they're both at the summit, they look down and see that on the ground below them, the paths they were walking form the shape of the wing, and in the center of the wing, the grass is colored to form a rainbow. There you have it, the answer to the riddle. Now that's an actual good riddle that took effort to solve. Also, Tsubasa tells Ageha, if you knew, you should have said so. Even Tsubasa realizes that this whole subplot is contrived. Ageha doesn't even apologize either, she just laughs. But no time for that, because this week's Romborg has appeared. Earlier, there was the scene where Kabuto came into the ropeway control booth in a disguise and told the person working there, hey, your shift's over. And there's actually justification this time for the guy not realizing that Kabuto is an anthropomorphic pig because he's so tired out from work that he doesn't even look at Kabuto as he passes. Anyways, today's Romborg is one of the ropeway carts. And if you thought the earlier parts of this episode were stupid, just you wait until you hear what happens in the fight scene. The first thing the Romborg does is grab Ageha, which is a bit of a problem since she's carrying Elle. And here's where the plot of this episode breaks apart completely. Elle's sling can fly. There's no reason that Elle can't just fly far away from the Romborg. Even if we accept that for some reason Elle just forgot about her sling's powers, Ageha's hands are free. After Tsubasa transforms into Cure Wing, there's nothing keeping her from throwing Elle down for him to catch. Oh, but what if Elle doesn't want to leave Ageha behind? Well, the Romborg is primarily after Elle. It doesn't want Ageha. So if Elle escapes, there's a good chance the Romborg will let Ageha go in order to have one more hand free to grab Elle. Even if the Romborg doesn't let Ageha go, it's not like Kabaton will summon a portal and whisk Ageha off to the Underg Empire, which is what would happen if the Romborg has L. Besides, there's nothing advantageous to L about being right next to Ageha right now. We've already established that she can use her magic baby powers from far away. And guess what? The entire fight scene relies on this plot hole. Tsubasa transforms into Cure Wing, but whenever he tries to attack the Romborg keeps using Ageha and L as a human shield, meaning he can't do anything to the Romborg without hurting them. So the Romborg goes down the ropeway, and there's nothing Cure Wing can do but watch. But the stupidity isn't over yet. See, Ageha has a plan to get free from the Romborg's grasp, and it relies on the Romborg being a complete and utter idiot. She challenges the Romborg to rock, paper, scissors, and announces beforehand that she's going to choose rock. Kabaton and the Romborg both mock Ageha for announcing her strategy beforehand because now the Romborg knows what to choose to win. Of course, to make the paper gesture, the Romborg has to open its hand, which would either mean letting go of the rope and falling from a really big height, or letting go of Ageha and L. Somehow, neither Kabaton nor the Romborg realize this obvious issue, so the Romborg plays paper to Ageha's rock, letting Ageha and L fall. I love it when characters are made into idiots for the sake of the plot. I mean, sure, the Romborg is implied to not have human-level intelligence, but you'd think that Kabaton would have warned the Romborg not to do the obvious bad thing. Anyways, Cure Wing catches Ageha and L. He then puts them onto the ground and flies back up to the ropeway to fight the Romborg by himself, but the Romborg is too quick and he can't get a hit in. Fortunately, Sora and Mashiro transform and join him. This put-together transformation sequence yet again focuses more on Sora than Mashiro, which doesn't make sense this time because this episode doesn't focus on one of them more than the other. Since everyone's transformations are so similar this season, it seems like they were made to be played together at the same time. So why is it that only one transformation gets to be shown at once, leading to one character getting all the lines? Somehow, Cure Sky and Cure Prism get all the way up onto the ropes of the ropeway and go tightrope running up to the Romborg. The Romborg jumps on the ropes to destabilize the tube, but it barely does anything because they just jump into the air and kick the Romborg in the crotch. Wing then uses Wing Attack, which actually is enough to finish the Romborg off by itself this time. How about that? Then, after the whole gang looks at the view from the top of the mountain together, we get to L in the car with some Soragoro merch. That's it? There were only 2 riddles? How do you even go from answering the last riddle to getting the merch anyways? Do you just tell the staff the answer and they give you the merch? What's keeping people from just looking up the answer online? And come to think of it, what would have happened if none of them had taken the easy route? That's the only route where the riddles were. Sure, Sora and Mashiro also got to see the cool wing thing because that route also went to the top of the mountain, but they had no way of knowing that it was the answer to the riddle. That's it for the Cure's mountain climbing adventures today, but there's one last scene before we wrap this up. Kabaton's sleeping on the roof of a building out in the cold. So I guess when he teleports away, he just teleports to somewhere on Earth instead of going to another realm like Pretty Cure villains do in other seasons. That actually makes sense because when he teleports away, it looks nothing like him using a portal. Anyways, Kabaton's boss speaks to him for the first time since episode 5. She basically says the same thing as last time. He'll be in huge trouble if he continues to fail her. But even though Kabaton is scared out of his mind, it's hard for me to take her seriously because she said last time that she was running out of patience and then did absolutely nothing as Kabaton continued to fail. How am I supposed to believe anything will come of Kabaton's continued failures this time? Then again, next episode is going to be about a one-on-one battle between Cure Sky and Kabaton, so maybe that'll be the one where he finally gets kicked out of the Underg Empire for good. That's it for this episode. Our ending the cameo is Curiel from 2018's Hugto Pretty Cure. I know, it's a ridiculous name. I get that she's a cheerleading-themed Pretty Cure and cheerleaders yell a lot, but come on, man. So yeah, this episode was a mess. I won't say that I found Ageha to be completely irritating all the time. I think they could have had a really good character arc with her learning to be less pushy and more respectful of Tsubasa's wishes. But they completely wasted it and decided that it was Tsubasa who needed to change, even though he did nothing wrong. That's what I find irritating. On top of that, the fight scene this episode was downright idiotic. It depended on several characters being dumbed down in order for the conflict and resolution to work. Finally, the riddles that were the entire plot of the episode were nonsensical and underwhelming. This is going to be the second thumbs down I've had to give this season. I hope I don't have to do it again.